everybody, and welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Alec Caberna. That's Mike Wolfgang. Welcome into the show here on your sports network. We got playoff coverage to go over, Mike. A ton of games here for this Friday. This is going to run 2 days, both Thursday and Friday. Couldn't find anything else to run here in the week, so figured let's just double up on this show. Everyone wants to hear about playoff football anyway. Before we get to that, I do have to mention both Howland and Cardinal Mooney boys soccer teams did move on after last night's win, so congratulations there. And tonight we do have 2 games on the network, actually, in volleyball playoffs. I saw Mentor Lake Catholic versus Crestview and Wellsville versus Ashtabula St. John will all be on the network tonight, so make sure if you want your volleyball kick, you can tune in there as well. Mike, let's get this show started, maybe with the biggest game of the postseason this week. St. Vincent, St. Mary on the road in Austintown, Fitch, for what should be just an absolute war between these two. Winner gets Hoban, likely. Barberton potentially could pull off an upset on the other side of this bracket, but this kind of looks like the game to watch up here on the, I'll say, the top side of Region 5. Because obviously these two teams are pretty great. St. V just hung 50 on Cleveland's John Hay this past weekend. They have had some hard games. They lost to Hoban, but it was by a touchdown. They lost to Walsh Jesuit. They got handed a big loss. That was their final game of the regular season. Also was the last time they went on the road. They've only had one road game in the last month. So I think when you really look at things and you look at St. V's schedule, they haven't played in a situation like this in quite some time, and we know Fitch is going to bring quite the playoff atmosphere to their stadium this week. So, as we look further and further into this game, I really think that home field advantage is going to be absolutely massive for Fitch, who's 7-0 at home this season. Their only loss was on the road in Massillon, Washington. And now St. V's got to come in Fitch. I don't like their chances, especially being on the road, having lost their last road game in Walsh Jesuit. Before that, they hadn't played a road game since since Ursuline at the end of September. They lost also beginning of the season to Glenville. That's a long time ago. It's a really good team. And when you talk about strength of schedules, St. V has a really good one. But at the same time, so does Fitch. And I think you really, when you break this down, you compare these two teams, paper-wise, it seems that they are very competitive. Fitch schedule ranks at 28.3 as a strength of schedule. St. V, 28.9. So, I mean, it is right there next to one another. Fitch was ranked higher, though, ultimately in the Division II standings with that 10-1 record. But I don't think that this is a game that Fitch can take lightly.
And well, this is why you play all year to get home field advantage, because like you mentioned, they've been really good at home all year. They haven't lost. So when you're a team like them that pretty much knows they're going to be in the playoffs, that's the next thing you're going to be fighting for all season long, is get that home field advantage. That's what Fitch has. So I think there's a lot of potential here for a Fitch upset. I'm not going to pick that because the way we've been talking about Fitch all year, I think we follow them a little bit more than St. V's this year. We know St. V's is a good team, but Fitch, you know what you're going to get out of them. You know that they have good athletes. You know that they have not even just like good athletes in general, but they have guys that are built frame wise. They're built pretty good. So I think that's going to bode well for them too. Like in tying the home field advantage stuff with that too. I think that you're going to get a Fitch team that's going to come out pretty strong. Like I said, I think there's potential for an upset, but I think the way we talked about Fitch all year, I got to roll with them.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the pretty safe pick here. I do think that there is a high potential for Fitch to go down in this game. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. Both teams have a win over Ursuline. They both won by a touchdown, and scoring-wise,
very similar.
St. V, very similar. I mean, a touchdown difference for either scoring column in that game. I just think the way Fitch has played down this stretch, I mean, they're on a 5-game winning streak, and it's been a dominating winning streak at that, starting with Strongsville. And then you go to 4 overtimes with maybe the most physical team they played on their schedule in Wadsworth. And then you play, Boardman, you get Harding, you get Mayfield, and now you're playing your 4th consecutive home game. Momentum is just building. And after your running back's performance in the last game, he had 300 yards and like 7 rushing touchdowns or something. It was a really stellar performance. I just don't think their momentum dies that quickly. I think St. V makes this thing go the distance, but I just don't see them winning this game against a Fitch team that seemingly has everything working at the right time. I would like to see that defense step up a little bit. We talked about it after the Mayfield game on Monday or Tuesday, that allowing 27 points to a team like Mayfield may be something to watch out for as they move into this game against St. V this week. Not quite an offensive juggernaut as Mayfield, but they can still get you, and they have really good defense over there in St. V. They've only allowed, I think, 119 points this season. But I'm going to go with you, Mike. I'm taking Fitch. Should set up a stellar Fitch-Hoban regional semifinal.
Well, I think, too, I just don't see them the way they are at home. If it's a close game, I think it's going to be advantage Fitch because they have the advantage of their home crowd that get behind them, give them some extra juice if they need it. I think, again, the way that we've seen Fitch all year, the comfort zone they are at home, it really doesn't matter where they're playing at too. I think they're gonna look really good at home, and I think that's what they've wanted all year, is have games like this at home. And plus, too, it's St. P's very capable of winning this game. Like I said, I think it's Fitch has potential here for an upset, but it's just very hard to go on the road and win playoff games. And I think St. P's capable of doing that. They've done it in the past. Other teams have done it in the past, going on deep runs, pretty much going through the road. But I think it's difficult to do at a place like Fitch where that's where they play their best football.
Yeah. Next game here, and it's in the bracket that we pretty much have a game going on every slate out of all but one. Sure, in Geneva, we don't have any teams there, but just below that, Kenston and Cheney going at one another. Kenston was able to pull the upset in round one over the University School Preppers. I think a team a lot of people kind of looked at, maybe a little overrated going into the postseason. I think that was kind of exposed here. It was not a game that Kenston probably should have won, but they played it close to the very end. They won on the road. But we see a lot of blowouts in round one because you normally see, 3 seeds taking on, 14 seeds. This is right about that mark. I don't think Cheney is going to have a ton of struggles here. I don't think Kenston is going to be a pushover, no doubt, because they were able to take down University School. They beat Mayfield by a touchdown, who we were just talking about, who played Fitch last week. They were in some tight games throughout the year. I mean, they stuck it with Chardon for a while. They're not necessarily a team that's going to win those big games, but they're a team that can compete in those big games, and they can stick around. And anytime you have a team that can stick around through 4 quarters, it does make it dangerous, especially when you're Cheney and you haven't necessarily had to do that a ton this season, but they definitely have enough experience in those late games. I mean, we talked about it, Canfield, the Ursuline. They had to go pretty deep against Alliance too, and Warren G. Harding. I think they're in a good spot, and really, from what I've seen out of them this season and from what I saw with them against East, I think they really just do look like a total team. I mean, they have weapons all around, FBS players on this roster, and you go up against a group like Kenston, who, while they are having a good year, no doubt, it doesn't feel like a season that they're going to go into a place like Cheney and pull this kind of upset.
Yeah, and the question here is, looking at the scores, what we know about Cheney, what we said about them all year, the calling card is their defense. And when you're a team like Kenston that has to go on the road, what are you going to come up with on offense that can kind of throw some different things at this Cheney defense, kind of get them off guard? What are you going to they're pretty good at stopping the run, Cheney. So what are you going to do to try to open the passing game up? What are you going to do to try to free things up in your playbook? So I think advantage status to Cheney because their defense, and they do enough on offense. We've seen what they scored the last 2 weeks, 34 against East, shut them out, and in the first round playoff game, 35. And they do pretty much they do enough to win, like you said. And when it's close games, and that's what I think. If it has a potential in this game to come out in a close game, that's also advantage Cheney. So a lot of these things point towards Cheney having the home game too. I think it's going to be another win for them in the second round.
Well, the biggest reason why I don't like Kenston to win this game is you look at their defense. It has been atrocious. 290 points allowed in comparison. Cheney's only allowed 135. And while there is a definite strength of schedule difference between the two, Cheney at 13.5, they've gotten helped out by a couple of those teams along the way. But Kenston's at 15.8. Thanks to their games against Perry, against Chardon, against Riverside, Mayfield, University School. They have played in the last 3 weeks against all teams that were in the postseason. And, they won 2 out of the 3 of them. They only lost game to Riverside. And so this is a really good team. And that's what I think I worry about is their ability to just compete with you and slugfest with you. It's like watching old Big 12 football. just slinging it every single time. If someone shows up with the defense, those offenses die. And I think you saw it week 2 when they played Perry, 60-32, that they lost that game because Perry had just enough of a defense, and with Kenston not having one, they were able to play that style of just air raid offense and score in bunches. Whereas while Kenston still had 32, and that has been enough to win most games on the season, it wasn't enough when they don't have a defense. So I think there's a clear hole here, and Cheney should be able to punch right through it like they've done all season long.
Like we just pointed out, they've done all season long. They haven't had too many troubles with it. And I think they're a tough team to play. I think that's pretty obvious. And I think that Kenston has their hands full when you can't defend a team that is pretty above average on offense like Cheney is, and that shuts people down defensively. So I don't think that bodes well for Kenston going on the road.
And winner this one either gets Geneva or Chardon. So it's going to be a slugfest next week too. There's going to be no breaks for this region whatsoever as it continues to move along. And that goes into our next game. Also in this region, Aurora taking on Canfield. Aurora coming out of the Suburban League, my old high school conference, by the way. They beat my alma mater really bad earlier in the year, 63-28. But then they won the next week against Cuyahoga Falls, 69-0. I think one thing you saw late in the year with Aurora, if you look at this schedule, well, they had losses to Barberton, who's in Division II postseason, Highland, who is a massive school. They're undefeated. They've only allowed 57 points on the entire year. And 3 of those came from this Aurora team. It's been a very difficult schedule all the way through. I mean, they have a win against Talmadge, who's going up against Ursuline tonight, and they won that 31-30. They beat Revere 42-7. Obviously, West Branch fans know what that team's made of. They're normally pretty good. Not this year. But, you know, like we saw earlier in the year when Fitch had to go up against one of these Suburban League teams, it's a very different brand of football than I think this Valley is used to. You get a lot of big boys in this area, and there's a lot of money in the majority of these programs in this conference. They don't mess around. This is next level football. It's about as hard as you're going to see for Canfield all season long. On the other side of that, though, they have put together a very respectable schedule. And while you look back and you go, all right, maybe they should have done a little bit better against some of these teams, can you really criticize a 9-1 record? It's hard. It's more I'm nitpicking a couple of things. New Philly last week, I think I would have liked to see more. You look back early in the year, probably should have done a little bit more against some of their opponents, especially Bellevue, and that be 28-12. I just feel like with the offensive weapons that that Canfield has, they almost seem underwhelming at times, that they're not able to just pull away in these games. I think the way we expect them to. And when you're going up against a team like this in Aurora, who can play 4 quarters, who's going to be physical with you, dominates lines of scrimmage, that's really to me, kind of the X factor in this game. If Canfield, in my opinion, finally lives up to the expectations I think I've had for them all season long, then they can win this thing handedly. But if they don't, and they continue to play kind of this lackluster style like we saw against New Philadelphia, it's just not going to happen. They're not going to get this done if they don't absolutely go in there ready to put the hammer down.
Well, yeah, I think that they had to play 4 quarters last week against New Philly, 27-10. They got pushed there for like you said, for our predictions last week. We thought it would have been more of a wider margin for Canfield, but I think that's a good test for them. Against a team that everybody knew they were going to win against, but they kind of got pushed there for only a 17-point win that a lot of people didn't expect. But look at their schedule too; they've had a lot of blowout wins, but a couple close ones too. Against the Cheney team we just talked about, it's pretty strong, lost by 3. So I think that's the thing with Canfield going into it. I talked about this all year with some teams that I like being able to win in different types of way. And I think that's what Canfield's done all year. And I think obviously the Aurora has too, because, a lot of teams at this point of the season, at this point of the playoffs, second round, they have gone in different types of games. But Canfield's, they got pushed last week. I think they might have helped them sometimes, because sometimes you see teams that get in the first round, get pushed around a little bit in the first round that are favorites, and then they kind of open things up after that. So we'll see how Canfield goes in this one, but I like how they kind of got wake-up call a little bit last week.
I hope it acted as a wake-up call because, we say that wake-up call, hey, can they get this done going to next week and use this as kind of that turning point for this postseason? I don't know. I think the one thing we do know, their defense is going to show up. Whether going up against an offense that has hung 400 points on the season, Canfield only put up 322, but their defense has allowed 103 in comparison to 230 for Aurora. Granted, a couple of those teams they went up against, when you talk about Riverside hung 63 on Lakeside this past weekend. Barberton is obviously going up against Hoban this week. They, very realistic chance to upset it. Highland's an undefeated team in Division One. They've seen hard teams in front of them. The only thing I think when you look at it, they haven't beaten those really hard teams. They have a great strength of schedule, but I think if you gave Canfield this schedule, I think they would have been able to run through it a little bit better, and maybe they would have given up a little bit more points than 103 this season. But I think their offense could have done something with it as well. Because of that, I'm taking Canfield to move on. I really like Aurora. I like a chance of an upset here, but I just think at the end of the day, Canfield is a better team.
I mean, there's a chance for upsets anywhere. Regular season, for a couple first rounds of the playoffs, there's always a chance for upsets. I do agree with you. I think Canfield's a better team. I like I said, I like the way they've won in different types of games this year. It got kind of. We'll see what happens about last week. I mean, it's remained to be seen how they react to that. We'll see how it goes in this game, but I like Canfield, and we'll make Richie happy on the network.
Right. Winner of that game gets the winner of Ursuline and Talmadge, another Suburban League team taking on one of our Valley teams. Not the first time, again, like we were just talking about. It's a group that lost to Aurora, as previously mentioned earlier in the year, but they had some pretty good wins along the way. They beat Uniontown Green in overtime. But really, their biggest win was Barberton, 20-14. They've really turned it on in the last half of the season. I mean, you look at 3 games against Cuyahoga Falls, Kent Roosevelt, and Copley, which not really having a great seasons this year for any of them. But in those 3 games alone, they put up almost 200 points and allowed under 50. And then even against Barberton and Villa Angela St. Joseph, they outscored opponents 41-21 the last 2 weeks. And I think that this is a group. They're coming in very physical team. Like I mentioned, this is a very physically dominant style of conference. However, that's also the style of football we've seen out of Ursuline. Randy Clark has this group touted as the best offensive line he's seen in high school football that he's ever seen. So, I mean, to have a compliment from the level of coaching of Randy Clark to this team who saw them in week 1, and obviously they've gotten better since then. Let's talk about that style of dominance. I truly don't believe Talmadge has a shot in this game. I know if we have any viewers from back where I'm from, they're not going to like me saying that because obviously they want Talmadge to win. I got connections over there. But I think Ursuline is that team right now. They're playing on a whole nother level. And I think their wake-up call came against Mooney in week 10 of the season, that Holy War. They knew it was going to be trouble. I don't think they expected 13-7 as the outcome of it. Week 1 against, in my opinion, a pretty good Hawken team, they were able to go out there and they were able to dominate. And I think that turnaround from the Mooney game to there, and you saw 13 points goes to 42 or 43 in the matter of 1 week. I think that was the turnaround I needed to see for Ursuline. Can they do that again? I believe they can. I think that they can go right back to it. Now, they're not going to get a blowout against Hawken against Talmadge like they did against Hawken, but I still like their odds here. I'm taking the Irish all the way. I give them 2 touchdowns in this game because of that physicality. I think they're going to be to out-physical the Talmadge Blue Devils.
Yeah, I think that just speaks to what you just said about getting praise from teams that you played early in the year, saying that they're a good unit. Obviously, we know the talent Ursuline has, but it's not always about their talent too. I think that close. I don't count them out of any game, to be honest, because I think it goes back to that week 4 it was against Fitch when they were down pretty big and they came back, still lost, but they made it interesting. Cheney, that was a little bit wider of a margin. Against St. V's, but they pretty much they've done pretty much what you've asked them to do all year against good teams. They've beaten good teams. They've held their own against some other teams too, and I think Ursuline's just a better team than Talmadge here. I think they got that wake call like we just talked about with Canfield, like with Mooney, 13-7. So come back the first round, they won pretty big. So I think I like the momentum they're on right now. I like the momentum they've had since some of the loss in the middle of the year, and they've been playing really good football. And I think that they're going to continue that in this week.
Only thing I worry about here with Ursuline, and especially moving forward into this postseason, at some point you need to be able to stretch the field as well and throw the football. Yeah. They haven't been a passing team this year. I mean, Erickson still has 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns, but he also has 8 interceptions to go along with it. And they really have not been a dominant group. I mean, 34 of their 45 touchdowns, or 34 of their 44 touchdowns have come on the ground. So that's the big thing for me. If they get caught in a game here against Talmadge where they're struggling to run the football, I think that's the only question mark I have. Are they going to be able to flip the game plan and air that thing out? As I think we're going to have some pretty chilly weather again here going on into this weekend. It's saying 72 to 58. Let's see what we got around kickoff. Should be mid 60s. So actually it looks like it'll be pretty good weather. So if teams are going to air it out, this is probably one of their last weekends to do so.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying for this weekend too, and moving forward, when teams know that the weather's kind of cold and you're even possibly wet too, that you're going to be running the ball a little bit more. When teams zone in on that on the first couple downs and it's the 3rd and 8 and it's an obvious passing situation, you got to be able to convert. And I think that's the one thing, like you said, I think it's lacking with Ursuline, but I think they're going to have a team where they can overcome that too. And again, if they don't get in those situations, they're looking pretty good.
Now, our next one here is one of just 4 YSN on YSN matchups that we have this weekend, and it's Struthers and West Branch. Mike, this is one of those games. I know West Branch coming in heavy favorite to Shields up for MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. They got all the awards, all the numbers, but I have not seen a gutsier team these last 7 weeks than Struthers. I mean, when you go back on the 6-game winning streak and even how it started with the loss to South Range, the loss to Hubbard in overtime, even the 1-point loss to Streetsboro, you're talking about the matter of 20 points that turns this 7-4 Struthers team into a 9-1 with massive wins over Hubbard, South Range, and Streetsboro. The only game I think they didn't have a chance in was Geneva earlier in the year. So you talk about maybe having the most impressive wins in high school football this year with a matter of 20 points. I think that really opens the door. Struthers is a wild card here right now. I think that this is a group that can really get things done, and they're just trusting the system.
Well, and look at the way they've kind of turned things around. Against Geneva, I understand that, like you said, but against Streetsboro, 42 points. They tightened up on defensively too, especially to start the year. And they're waking up their offense too, because against Girard, I know that Girard's had some of their injuries too on both sides of the ball, but that's a team that's normally pretty good at defense. They hung 42 on them. And it's a game you were calling, I believe. So this Struthers team, I like the way they've rebounded. I think I was saying Tuesday, I think they were playing with a lot of momentum on this winning streak they've been on. And I think for a team like West Branch or, if Struthers advances and whoever they play after that, I think this is a team you got to look out for. They could go on a run here because of that momentum factor, because the way they turn things around, the way they play, they've looked pretty good since the middle part of the year up until now.
All right. Well, then I think here comes the ultimate question. Can Struthers do the unthinkable and take down West Branch, whose only loss was in week 1 to Canfield by 4 points? Since then, they've gone on to beat the likes of, Alliance, Carrollton, Salem. Sorry, my page was loading here for the second. This is a team in West Branch that, truthfully, with 503 points scored on the year, is a whole different monster than I think anything Struthers has seen. Yeah, they saw South Range, but South Range is more of a group that is just going to play to your style and beat you at your own game. And they can pretty much do that every time. And I think that's the one difference we're seeing with West Branch and South Range. You obviously won't meet their opposite or their Division 4, Division 5, but it's an offense I think we just expect to play well in West Branch. So I don't know. I'm still up in the air.
I'm up in the air too, but I guess I'll go before you. I'm going to continue them. I'm going to ride the momentum. I'm going Struthers. I know it's going to be tough. I know it's against a different animal here with West Branch compared to some of the teams they played, but Alec, when you in any sport, really, especially in football or baseball, when you're playing your best, you can go on runs. So I think I'm going to go with Struthers.
Oh, taking the Wildcats upset.
Yeah.
This is so hard for me to pick right now because my heart is saying Struthers, my head is saying West Branch, and I don't know which one to trust here.
Sometimes you got to go with your heart. That's what I did.
I think I'm right there with you, and the biggest part of it, I know West Branch is really great, and they're playing as a great football team, but the difference is Struthers is playing with heart, and like we said, you got it. Sometimes, it's hard over the brain. And at the moment, it just feels like Struthers is going out there, house money every weekend. And I feel that's the difference. Playing with reckless abandon at this point in the season, you have to take risks and you have to go out there and just want it more. And at the moment, I just haven't felt in these last 6 games that they've won that their opponent has wanted it more than them. And my biggest problem here is I haven't seen West Branch this season. That's probably the biggest reason. But Mike, I'm right along with you.
There we go.
Ring the bell. Rung it last week for Mooney. They pulled the upset. Now we're both taking Struthers here this week. Wow.
I like it.
An 8-1. We'll see if it happens. And that'd be crazy. District final. I don't think many West Branch fans would be happy about that one. They get a comment here talking about Canfield's offense pulling their starters when they're up 35. And I do just want to address this. You go back on the season when they've been up 35, Boardman, Howland, East, the team from Canada. What other points have they been up by 35 against a good team? I mean, I only call them underwhelming because I feel like they should be doing that against the likes of New Philadelphia last week. Maybe not against, Cheney or Dover, but when it took on Bellevue, a team that's had an underwhelming finish to the season. They've had a hard strength of schedule all in all. But I feel those games where we knew they were going in to win, while they pull them at 35 points when they go up there, it's just we're seeing other teams that are able to go up by 35 in the first quarter against teams that we thought were on the same level. Canfield's a different monster. We're expecting Canfield's offense with the weapons that they have to go out there and perform pretty much better than Lowellville or West Branch. I think that's just the standard. When they beat West Branch in week 1, we expected that kind of performance, elite level play. And I feel like that's the only side where it's just a little underwhelming from what I think we expect to see out of them.
Fair.
But with that being said, we're going to take a quick break and be right back here on your sports network. A ton of games still to go, folks, so don't go anywhere. More high school playoffs when we return.
I support police funding, securing our borders, and parental rights in education. I'm attorney Mark Hanai, the only Republican running for the 7th District Court of Appeals. I will always follow the law.
Paid for by the committee to elect Mark Hanai judge. Dave Johnson, chairman.
Fall is in the air. The kids are back to school, crowds are cheering for the home team, and Myers Family Insurance is prepped for another crazy Medicare season. Every year there's changes, some big, some small, so it's important to have a conversation to make sure your plan is going to meet your expectations for the coming year. Give our team a call today to schedule your annual review.
For all your Medicare needs, call Myers Family Insurance or visit us on the web. Check us out online at myersfamilyins.com.
Locally owned and operated, Sheely's relaxed shopping experience means browsing and lounging is always encouraged.
Find Flex Deal and more at Sheely's Furniture and Appliance, because the best things in life happen at home.
I'm Mark Hanai, a conservative Republican. I believe in family values, the Second Amendment, and our Constitution. Vote for the only Republican running for the 7th District Court of Appeals. Protect your rights. Vote Hanai for judge.
All right, welcome back into the show. Mike, let's hop right on into the next game. The Beavers continue on an epic run. They have won 9 in a row since dropping their first 2 games of the season. Now they got a tough opponent coming in as well in Canton South, who took down Salem last week in an absolute slugfest. This is a group in Canton South, Mike. They've been in a 1-score game each of the last 4 weeks against Orville, in which they lost 38-35. Orville just 6-5. But a group that stuck it to them late in the year trying to fight for playoff positioning. They were in a 1-point win against Canal Fulton's Northwest, pardon me. They were in a 1-point game against McDermott's Northwest, and now a touchdown game last week that they win against Salem. You want to talk about a team that more likely than not is going to make this thing a last-minute ball game? I think we found it here. You even go back earlier in the year, overtime loss to CVCA, a 1-point win over Fairless. I mean, this is a team that they don't want to win early on. They want this thing to go deep, and I think that play is probably more to their strengths because you look on the Beavers' schedule so far, Mike, they haven't been in a one-score game all year. Well, they do have losses to Indian Valley and Salem early in the year. They have not been in a one-score game. They were in a close one last week for a while against Coventry, ultimately pulled away and had their fans probably on the edge of their seats for a while, clutching their pearls. But, they can't afford that slow start here against Canton South because it opens the door for those Wildcats just to kind of sit around. And anytime this team sits around, I think you saw it with Salem last week, with that being 28-21. The lower scoring this gets, I think the more it favors Canton South. If Beaver can get that offense going and hit the 50-point margin that they've pretty much had in every game they've played since November 18th when they only put up 31. They had 62, 65, 56, 56, 49, 56. If this is high scoring, it's going to be Beaver all the way. But if it's low scoring, then Wildcats have a really good shot to take this.
And that's why I think the key for Beaver is to get things going early offensively, get a couple points on the board, get yourself feeling good because, the last 2 weeks, they haven't been too bad on this run, especially since they lost those first 2 games, but they haven't been too bad defensively in that stretch. These last 2 weeks, 35 points and 35 points. So I think they got to tighten things up defensively because, like you said, if it gets close game, it's up for grabs late third quarter, start of the fourth. That's advantage Canton South. So I think Beaver, that's the important thing here is get some separation early, get some things going early, get yourself feeling good because if you get a close. Not saying they could lose, but if you get things close, that's advantage Canton South, and you don't want that for Beaver. So get yourself going early. I think it's advantage here.
I think that had to have been the message this week after the slow start to Coventry last time out. I think that just has to be normal. Hey, win this thing early on. Don't make this thing like it was a week ago. You will not be able to pull away late in the game against Canton South. You can pull away early. You give yourself the shot to win. I think they'll probably get up around 40. I'm sticking with the Beavs.
I'm sticking with them too. And I think just create some separation early. It's easier said than done, but that's what they got to do to win. I'm going Beaver.
Next one up, the Brookfield Warriors, who Matt will be accompanying down to Downton this weekend to go up against the Bulldogs on Friday. Another reason we're not having a show tomorrow. He has to leave at like 2 o'clock to get down there. So just in time for this game. It's quite the far drive. I think, one of the first times we're talking about that drive because we've still had a lot of local games to this point. This is one of those first ones that I think we look at and go, all right, now you got one of our YSN teams going on a long drive. How is that going to impact them? Farthest they've played away today so far this season was in Garfield. They played really great going on that longer bus journey, but really outside of that, not a ton of far games for them this season. Maybe Springfield would be on that list too. I think that's a little over an hour for them, but this is definitely the farthest journey they've had to make. I think that's the one spot that worries me here when we talk Brookfield football is having to go on this long trip, but they're only lost to Ursuline in week 1, and they have looked like the dominant crew we expected the entire rest of the season. And when you have a defense as good as this one, I think it makes it just so hard to go up against. Outside of Ursuline, no one's gotten more than 2 touchdowns against them. PV had the most, and it was 16 points. So this is a game I think really favors Brookfield. You're going up against a Downton crew that, put up 62 a week ago against Jackson Milton, put up 41 over Norwayne, and can really score. But with the way Brookfield plays, and they're just relentless attack to the football. I mean, they run at you, reckless abandon, sending 10 guys. They'll send 10 of their 11 guys out there and leave the 11th man back in coverage, and somehow he'll still come up with an interception thanks to the pressure being applied by their by the likes of Heater, T-Trick, Bartlett. I mean, it's a whole crew out there that is rushing the quarterback and getting there fairly often. The only thing I worry about, travel, and you're going up against a very explosive offense, something they haven't seen since, I'll say, Garfield a couple weeks ago, which they handled well, but they couldn't handle Ursuline at the beginning of the season. I don't know if they rematched what the difference would be. I don't think Ursuline gets 52 in that game ultimately if they replay it again at some point. But that being said, I think Downton's going to make this a high-scoring affair, and we haven't seen Brookfield have to get into one of those. I like Brookfield to get it done, though.
Yeah, we haven't, but I think that if it's in that type of game, they have the capability of doing that, because we talked about after that PV matchup on Tuesday that they have – well, first of all, we'll start with the defensive side because you brought that up too. I know it was against PV, a game they were expected to win, but they just have guys rallying to the football. Like you said, they're just relentless. They get guys flying around. Every time it seemed like they were getting towards the 50-yard line, middle of the field, PV, Brookfield shut them down. So I know it's a different matchup here against Dalton, but if it's a high-scoring game, I think Brookfield, they can hold their own in that because the weapons they have on offense, for them saying they want to highlight Christian Davis on the offense, make him a focal point. They did that against PV. I think they're going to do that a little bit more here and mixing the passing game because the weapons they have on the outside. But I think Brookfield's a strong team. The one thing I do worry about, like you said, is traveling, because you're going to have to travel a long way to play some of these teams in the playoffs too. I think a lot of teams get out of that comfort zone, but some teams deal well with that. And I think Brookfield, I'm confident in them getting past that, going out there playing their brand of football. Because normally when they say they're going to do things, they do it, and they're pretty good at it. So I got to go Brookfield in this one.
I think a big part of their ability to play well on the road, Mike, is Randy Clark and his, I'll say, fairly even demeanor most of the time. Once he's out there in football mode, of course. I mean, it is not always the friendliest of coaching environments, but I think that demeanor to get guys ready to keep people focused on the goal. He's not going to let this group break stride. And I think that's the biggest thing for Brookfield. If they need to go high scoring, they have weapons all around to do so. I don't have any problems with them trying to air this thing out all over the field because, from what I saw early in the year, they have weapons all around. And Isaiah Jones just showed up in the postseason, which is something I think this team has really, really been waiting for, to see that kid go and play to his highest potential. I think he's here. If he keeps playing it, they're going to go on a deep run.
And Alec, at this point of year, when you have a coach that, like Coach Clark, that the message is always there. We talked about with Coach Hake on Tuesday's show. The message is always there. When you're this because you've done Brookfield games. When you're on the field talking to Coach Clark before the game, watching the team warm up, he's so zoned in, and he's pointing guys out. Like I was with Matt last week, and he's talking to his kicker. Like he was missing a couple kicks and warm ups. He was saying, "Do this." Like he's always zoning in on guys to try to get the best out of them. And I think he's going to do that here. That's why the travel part of it I worry about, but I know he's going to have his guys ready to play because he always does.
Yeah. If they win, you either get United or the more likely scenario, Kirtland, which is going to be some kind of matchup next week if Brookfield can get this done on the road in Downton. I mean, I hope they can get there. I want to see that game ultimately. And I think Matt would love to go to out to that one.
He's already been talking about it.
Those Warriors. Oh, yeah. I know he's been talking about it. He's been waiting for that thing to come up. Our next game takes us back to last year. Cuyahoga Heights beats Valley Christian at home. This time around, the Red Wolves have to travel in to Spartan Stadium to take on the War Eagles, who in their first defense of Boardman's beautiful stadium down there pitched a shutout, 53-0. Not only was that a shutout, it was their first shutout since September 2nd on the road in McDonald. At home on September 24th against Leetonia. I missed that one over there, but only 3 shutouts of the season, including that one. This is Valley Christian football, baby. They made a great defense in round 1. And from all the problems I saw with this team before the game last Friday, and even talking to the coordinators who going into that night apparently had scouted the wrong quarterback for Trinity. The film they got sent did not feature the starting quarterback of Trinity because he had been injured a couple of games. So the film they had showed nothing. And yet in this game, Trinity ran 44 plays and got just 44 yards, which is crazy. They were also 1 for 12 on third downs against Valley. And I know this becomes a whole different game now going up against the Heights. But as I was going through those stats earlier today, I was just looking at it and go, Valley's been really great all season. And yet against the playoff team in round 1, they may have put together their best game of the entire season. Everybody pitched in to win that game. It was not a one-man show. However, now you go up against a coach who has a lot more experience than last week. For this head coach down at Cuyahoga Heights, and Al Martin, pardon me, he's been coaching for 25 years, and he's coached all of them, all 25 years at Cuyahoga Heights High School. He's got a record of 242-63 at this school. You talk about a coach with about as much experience as you could ask for. This is the guy that you look at to go, all right, let's see what you have here in the postseason. The one common opponent, though, between these two, Trinity, who we just saw 50-0. Cuyahoga Heights got a shutout against them as well, but they only put up 17 points that game. It was 17-0. The biggest difference between these two schools going into tonight is the offensive firepower. While you look on the board, Valley has put up 380 points to just 88 allowed. Heights has put up 259 to just 77 allowed. Strength of schedule, Cuyahoga Heights negative 16.1 and Valley Christians is negative 19.5. So no, they haven't really played one another. But in the one common denominator we have in Trinity, it was an absolute crime committed in that game for Valley Christian a week ago. And they're playing just great football. And it's the first undefeated run. First time they've been to this point in a decade. 10 years ago when they hit the second round, they won. Third round's the farthest they've ever gotten. Andy Hake's going to get them there. I'm taking War Eagles all the way. And it's not just because I'm covering them, but it's not the same Heights team we saw a year ago make a run. I think they ended up Final Four or Final Eight, one of the two teams left. But it's not that same team. I think you saw it. They lost to Lutheran West early in the year out of Rocky River, a team that, is 10-1. It's a very good team. It was 14-8. It was low scoring. And that's what we're going to see this week. I don't think this thing gets up into the 40s, 50s if the Red Wolves can help it. But if Valley gets this offense going, they're impossible to stop. But that's just it. The only team I truly believe can beat Valley is Valley. Yeah. If they show up ready to go, they are the best team in the state.
And why is there any doubt to believe? Why is there any doubt in your mind that they wouldn't show up with the way that they are with Coach A? They've done it all season, and we talked pretty extensively about it on Tuesday. That why else would you doubt that? Because of the way that they prepare, the way they get fired up, because their head coach. I think that's some similarities in this game. It's two good teams, two good coaches, but again, not just because we talk about Valley Christian more in Cuyahoga Heights, but Valley how do you have any doubts after what I just said and what they did last week? 53-0. I don't care who you're playing in the first round of the playoffs. That's a near perfect game if it isn't. So Valley's got things going on. They know what, like you said, the only way they're going to lose is if they shoot themselves in the foot. And I don't know. It could happen down the road, but I just don't see it happening yet. I got Valley.
Yeah, and Mike, the biggest thing for me when we talk about shooting themselves in the foot, they did. They shot themselves in both feet against Southern. And yet still in the fourth quarter on crutches, they got it done. And I think that's the biggest thing with this team. Seasons past, they went down. They started playing bad. They got down on themselves. And as hard as Andy Hake tried, he couldn't pull them out of those slumps that they went through last season. This year, even when they're playing bad, it's not Hake that's picking each other up now. It's these players. They're going in there. They're going, hey, it's the next play. They got a great guy over there on the sideline in Ian Trowers who's done a great job keeping this team involved. When the varsity squad hits to the bench and JV goes out there, it's his job to make sure that, hey, whoever's on the field, everyone over here is cheering them on and keeping this energy. And I think that's what's led to the success this season. It's no longer just, hey, this coach is going to have to pull you out of it. It's now yourselves. Once you can pick yourself up and keep playing, I think that's what makes you a dangerous team. That's why they've been a dangerous team. This coaching staff will tell you 10 times out of 10, are they going to win this game by 20 or lose it by 20? I've called it a little bit, hogwash this season because they haven't had one of those games that they think that they could lose by 20. It just hasn't happened. And I think that's a true testament to these players. And I'm going War Eagle, baby.
Yeah, and after that Wellsville game, we were talking about that Wellsville game as being a little bit of a head scratcher, and they come up the first round of the playoffs and just totally dominate. So they found, I think that's a difference from what it was last year. They found ways to dig out of holes because even though they won those games, they weren't looking like themselves. So they come out in this first round playoff last week and blow out Trinity. And I think that's going to continue. I don't know if I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout in this game, but I just like the momentum they're playing with.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think maybe the only thing to watch out for is the defense on the side of the Red Wolves. I mean, I think I'll point this out. Through the first 6 games of the season, Mike, they allowed 2 scores, 14 points in the first 6 weeks of the season. And then they lost to Lutheran West. It carried over into Cardinal game, but they got redemption on Cardinal 35-26 last week. But the 26 points a week ago was the most they had let up. So I think that there's a very obvious exhaustion factor, I think, setting in on that side. And I think that's something Valley can look to expose with their championship caliber speed. I mean, Bradley was in state championships for track. So I think that's one of the big things to watch out for is if Valley's offense shows up, and so far they have.
Yeah, it'll be a good one.
Next one up, Tigers is Springfield, and one of our other YSN matchups go on the road, and they take on the odds-on favorite the entire year to win, not just the region, but the division in JFK. The Eagles up there, the Catholic Eagles, have played really great football all season long. And I think maybe the key factor I look in, Mike, is these defenses in the last 4 weeks. Last 4 weeks for Springfield, 3 shutouts and 7 points allowed to Jackson Milton. For JFK, their last 4 games, 17 points allowed between Harding and Cleveland Central Catholic, but they also had a forfeit and 2 shutouts in that route as well. So they both come in with just monster defenses. Springfield has had such a great run. But again, who have they beaten? Mineral Ridge was the start, but then you look at it, every team on their schedule has really fallen off. And, we liked Matthews, of course, early on. We thought they were a good team, but they showed nothing in that game against Springfield to make us, stay with it that, hey, it was a good end of the season. It was a bad end of the season for the Mustangs. 42-0. One showed off some dominance from Springfield. Posting this many shutouts this recently is great, and I'm sure it's going to give them some momentum. But they have not seen an animal like this JFK crew, maybe since the first 4 games in which they lost all 4 to Lowville, Geneva, Brookfield, and South Range. This is the level of competition. So now that we know this team is back and they're firing and they're playing really good football, can they go now and kind of right the wrongs from the first 4 games? That's the only question I have here, as if they can actually make this season stand up and put some weight behind it. Because at the moment, it's a winning record, but it's kind of a flimsy record, I think is what we would call it. There's not a lot of life behind it.
Well, I'm going to sound like I'm talking backwards here because the way I was talking about what Struthers is, I like the momentum they're playing with. I like what Springfield's done too, but like you pointed out, I think Struthers has played better competition in the run they've been on since Springfield, beating a Girard team, beating some other teams that they play close to and won different types of ways. But I'm going to use that reverse here with Springfield. I just think it's going to run out here because I think JFK is just – we keep talking about better teams. JFK, I think it's the better team in this matchup. And the wins that they have too. I mean, we looked at that win against Garfield too. It's like, hey, they won 1 point win. JFK got that one. And the other thing about JFK, Alec, and you know this because you covered them, they've been on big runs in the playoffs recently too. So I like JFK. They're familiar with these spots. I think they're a better team in this one. So I'm going with the Eagles.
Mike, the biggest problem I have when picking JFK in this game, much like I said with Springfield, who have you beaten? For me, JFK, who have you beaten as of late? Rootstown's probably the best win on there, and it's 7-4. Maybe that 7-4 Rootstown is a better win outside of Mineral Ridge than Springfield has had in their other 6 wins. But again, compare the front half to the back half. You went champion Delton, Garfield, Perkins, Marlington. And then the back half was Mogador, Rootstown, Aquinas, Cleveland Central Catholic, Southeast, and Fairport Harding. They've had some easy games. You can't deny that down this final stretch. I think you just hope they haven't lost that edge that got them the win against Garfield 22-21. If they come out with that same fire they had early in the year, this is going to be JFK, and they should be able to handle business fairly easily. But if this is the case of, they haven't had to play competitive football in a while and they slip up, if you let the Tigers stick around, the Tigers are going to take it. But ultimately, I'm taking Eagles here. That we've had too much faith in them this season. They've been the odds-on favorite pretty much the entire year. I don't think now is the time to back out of it.
Yeah, they've had a great year, and I think it's going to continue.
Next one up It's the matchup this fan base has been looking forward to all season long. They wanted it. Now we've got it. The Southern Indians down in the Wigwam play host to Norwalk St. Paul in the most anticipated matchup Southern has had in quite some time for this coaching staff. Obviously, Valley and United were the big games of the regular season, but you get them every year. It's a guarantee. St. Paul, they've only seen in the postseason, and it's ruined a couple of really great years for them along the way. They have their opportunity to get it back here, and I don't think anything is going to stand in front of them. They have never beaten St. Paul. They are 0-2 against them all time. Lost last year 21-14. Lost in 2020 48-14. Both times they were in Norwalk. Now the game is in the Wigwam. That is the X factor. Home teams won every game in this series so far. Why change it now? St. Paul defense has allowed almost 150 more points on the season, and they've scored 20 less. I'm going Southern. Every stat is in their favor. They wanted this game. Now you got it. Don't let me down, Southern, because this was the game that I heard about when I was there. We want St. Paul here. They got it. Go do it.
Yeah, go out and do it. It's put up or shut up because you've wanted them all year. And I think when you're focused on a team getting a team and you got it, what motivation you need? Because I mean, what other if you're not fired up, what other speeches do you need in the locker room all week? What other motivation you need to practice during the week when you have the team you wanted? I think they'd be up for this game. I think they'd be fired up for it. It's a home game too. I think Southern's pretty zoned in on this one, and they've had a great year, pretty dominant one in the opening round against South Central. So I think it's a team that they've wanted. They're going to key in on that. I think it's just going to be a good game for Southern. I think I like them in this game.
I like Southern. The next game we have our final game to talk about here. The final game of the week might be the biggest blowout we have. The 15th game to talk about here on the show features a team that has not grabbed the shutout this season, but I think now comes the time. The time that the best quarterback in the state of Ohio comes to shine, one of the top 10 leaders in career passing touchdowns in the state of Ohio. Louisville and his Rockets, baby, 55-0. I've been waiting to put this up since 2:15. Go Rockets, beat Lucas. Those 5 and 6 Cubs don't know what's about to hit them. They're going to get absolutely steamrolled after their upset of Toronto last week. It ain't going to happen this time around. The Ville is coming. The Ville is winning, and they are going to make this thing look bad.
The Ville's coming, and they're rolling. That's what it is. We've been talking about them week in and week out. There's just nothing left to say. It's the way they play on offense. That's the horse of the whole team. That's what they do. Pretty much, they just beat with their offense. I mean, and they sprinkle in some defense. That Ridge game only giving up 7 points too. These some other games they've only given up single-digit points. So level of competition, whatever, they still get it done every phase of the way. And obviously, led by their offense is high-powered. I just don't think Lucas has anything to stop that. I don't know if any team, obviously to this point, or that they could put in coming down the stretch here in the playoffs moving on. I don't know who could stop their offense. It's just that deadly.
Well, that's all we have for the high school playoff extravaganza. Second round on to regional semifinals if you win. Ultimate goal, man. A lot of teams have never made it past this round. We'll see if some of those streaks get broken this week. But, Mike, before we end out the show, let's hand out our highlights of the week. Mike, personally, this one's going to hurt you, but my Ohio State Buckeyes went in and played in the best fourth quarter in program history and absolutely closed the door on Penn State's upset. Our real first top 25 win of the season. Obviously, Notre Dame was proven to not be a caliber that I think everyone was expecting them to be this season, but first top 25 win for Ohio State. I'll take it however I can get it. We just needed the win.
That's all that matters. You guys won. I'm not going to be salty about it. I think Penn State. I'm not discouraged by the way they played. Obviously, I wanted to win it, but there's a couple things they could have changed. They could have won the game. So that's on them. So rebuilding a year, we expect. I talked to you after the show the other day. I'm fine with it. My highlight, I got to go.
The team you're wearing?
I actually was gonna think. I know I went with them last week, but I'm gonna keep rolling with the Cavs, man. Big OT win last night. Actually, 2 in the last 5 days against the same team in Boston.
Yeah,
they look pretty good against the Knicks.
So third overtime game of the year, I believe, is what they were saying on the broadcast.
And I'll add a twist to it. The what 6-1, 7-game starts since the year last year they went to the finals. So it's been a couple years.
I
so
like the sound of that. They're also number 2 in the Eastern Conference and actually tied for second overall in the entire NBA, just behind the undefeated Milwaukee Bucks. And back-to-back wins over a team that was in the NBA Finals in overtime. I'll take it. That was great to see last night. And I mean, how about the way they get it done too? I mean, just playing when they need to. They took a quarter and a half off and they still beat Boston. Loved it.
I do love it, and they finally got a closer too. Again, I have my questions with that trade, but that Donovan Mitchell trade, man, it's worth it.
And I think it's worked for both teams. I'm not going to lie. The Jazz right now are 3rd in the Western Conference in a rebuilding year. And while they're 6-3 right now, and they did lose their last game, I think it really paid off for both teams in that trade. It's hard to look back right now and say either team lost, but the Jazz are just trying to recreate the Cavs over there, and it's working.
It was working. I think, though, with Donovan Mitchell, I just think that, I love Darius Garland, but we finally have our closer in Mitchell. I think it showed up last year in that playing game that although Darius was good, it just ran out of gas there at the end. I think now they have Donovan Mitchell and some other guys after that. So they got their guy, and they look pretty good with it.
Without any further ado, this week's meathead of the week, the Packers. Easy cut, dry, clean right here. They don't make a single move at the trade deadline. It's been one of the most criticized moves at the deadline all week, was that the Packers did not pick up a wide receiver. I mean, we saw quite a few get moved in this final week of the trade deadline in the NFL. Packers sat where they were. They apparently like what they have. I don't know why. They have an offense, passing wise, it ranks probably middle of the pack, but they're looking really bad right now, and not making a move when you don't really have any time left with Aaron Rodgers. It's probably this or bust if his time hasn't already passed to win that last Super Bowl for him. That this crew isn't going to get it done.
And if they don't win this weekend against the Lions, man, it's really bad.
Yeah,
that's the team Aaron Rodgers owns. It's a team that's not very good. I think they had the chance to get. You couldn't get Brandon Cooks from Houston. You couldn't get Chase Claypool from the Steelers. You couldn't get some other guys on the market.
They offered a second rounder to Pittsburgh for him.
And that's what they got.
But yeah, Pittsburgh was like, Chicago's probably going to have a worse record than you, so we're going up there.
Yeah, it's a smart move.
That's why they went that way. But I just think not making that move is highly questionable. And obviously, I mean, they're still in a playoff hunt technically, but Vikes are looking like the team to beat right now in that division. And I think a big part of that, those meatheads up in Cheesehead country didn't do anything at the deadline. But that's all the time we have for today. Best of luck to all those playing this weekend. We'll be back on Monday to break down all of those postseason games. Best luck. I'll be out in Boardman for Valley Christian, Cuyahoga Heights. Matt will be down in Downton for the Brookfield game. Best of luck to all, and we'll see you next week.